Hello. Now, on Thursday, the 1st of October, we have our infamous full moon in the sign of Aries. Now, this is, I always say this, every month I always say this is a really big one, but I suppose, yeah, it's a really big one. They all are. However, a full moon, anyway, is like quite a pivotal marker in the month. It is the time of the month when there is the most light, so we can see, so we think, the most clearly. Well, really, in truth, our inner world, our psyche, our relationships, and the sort of intricacies of life, society, our beliefs, are illuminated, so we have the opportunity to see them more clearly. We have the opportunity to see ourselves more clearly. We have the opportunity to, as everybody says, release what no longer serves us at the full moon, only because perhaps sometimes our blind spots are illuminated. Now, the sign of Aries in itself is primal and intuitive, fiery, ruled by the head. Aries is very, very heady. I know because I'm an Aries. But there's a curiosity, a youthfulness, a kind of young, inquisitive, quite brave, but also unplanned nature to Aries. I read somewhere years ago that the Aries jumps into the water and then asks how to swim. So when we have this very fiery, cardinal, young, expressive, highly individual moon, opposite are sweet, diplomatic, airy, kind of sweetly searching, collective, group orientated, and just frankly a lot more paced sign of Libra. We have this really clear distinction. Now, we have this distinction at every full moon anyway. Of course, when we have a full moon, the sun and the moon are opposite. So we have our sun, which is like our ego, our self, our brightness, what is inherently obvious. And then we have our moon, what is secret, what we keep in, what we take out to only show certain people, or a very intuitive or sort of perceptive people can see and perceive through the subtleties in us. So when we have this stark opposition anyway, this is just so greatly reinforced when we bring in the opposition of Aries and Libra. Aries and Libra are the axis of relating and of relationship. Aries is the relationship with the self. Do I trust the self? Do I know myself? Who am I? What do I want? What do I need? What can I change? Aries is very I-centered. If an Aries is off in their sense of self, then they can massively sort of dominate or sort of fragment a group space. The Aries has to know who the Aries is before they can begin to engage with the other. Now, if you take a Libra, Libra is the total opposite. The Libra has to know how their relationships are balanced, how their relationships are doing, who they are in a group, what is their role, before they can then step away and think, okay, this is me as an individual. Libra's in the group and Aries is in the self. So we have this kind of stellium in Aries this year, going on actually into next year. And the moon is sitting there with it at the moment. So this brings up a lot, not only individually around who are we individually, how can we contribute to the collective individually, but also the patterns and the shape of the collective as it currently stands. There is a strong emphasis this month on personal identification, on personal needs, and really self-unbinding. Who am I? Like, as a true individual, who am I? what do I think? What do I believe? Separate and outside of my friendships, my family, my relationship, my neighborhood, my governments, my society. What do I actually think? Do I agree? Or actually do I disagree? And taking that time to allow yourself to be an individual is what is being summoned. But the solo journey can be a very lonely one, and I understand why lots of people decide not to take it, because it's incredibly lonely, and I'm not sure also how natural it is. We live in a funny kind of world now. I have a teacher, this is kind of off topic, but I have a teacher, Daniel 4, and last week he was saying to us about grief, and that grieving is incredibly natural. People have been grieving as long as they've been living, of course, and that in the West we have a kind of a strange relationship to grief. Grief is not interwoven into our society. It's very rare that you see, when you're out and about, anybody grieving. It's very, very rare. It's quite a hidden, introverted, kind of coveted thing, grief, is that we have never really been taught. I've never been taught, and the people that I interact with, they all say the same, that they were never taught how to grieve. It's not something that we're really that familiar with, but something that we will all, or have all, been through. Now, Daniel, my teacher, was saying that there is a real difference between grieving by yourself and grieving in a community of like psychically well people. There's almost like a beautiful catharsis in collective grieving as opposed to just grieving with the individual. He also said that a lot of the pain that we feel and a lot of the grief that we feel actually isn't ours. And this is some of the problems with psychology, with sort of Western psychology, is that we are always looking as individuals, and this ties back into this stellium in Aries, this overemphasis on the individual. On one hand, it is so important to identify yourself as an individual and to question and to think, what do I want? What do I need? Do I agree with this? Do I agree with that? Actually, this isn't my belief. That's very important as its own sort of entity. However, one of the problems with the West, one of the problems with the way that society has been created now, is that we overemphasize with ourselves as individuals, and actually we are always looking and seeking and trying to understand, where does my pain come from? Where does my pain come from? Why have I got this attachment style? Why have I got this habit? Why have I got this trigger? Why? I must find the root of it. It must be in my childhood. If not, it must be in my past life. It must be from this lover. It must be from my parents. And we just dig and dig and dig and dig and dig. But sometimes when I step away from it, because I do this, I've done this my whole adult life, when I step away from it, what it looks like, if you look at it from above, is that we are all just individuals, and we've just dug ourselves enormous holes, and we're at the bottom of these holes, looking for the root of this sadness, looking for the root of these difficult feelings, looking for the root of this kind of pain. And really we're just going into ourselves and isolating ourselves more. A lot of the pain that we feel and a lot of the grief that we feel, according to my teacher, Daniel, is ancestral, cultural, societal, environmental, empathetic, absorbed pain that is okay to feel, but has to be just moved and felt in a community and in a collective. It's not so individually ours. Now this has been a key theme this year and is going into next year, and actually the year after, there is this stellium in Aries. There is Chiron, Mars, the moon at the moment, and Lilith. There is lots of old pain. Lilith is old pain of the feminine, old wounding of the feminine, which we all carry in our bones, in our blood, whatever you identify, it is in all of us. Chiron is like large collective pain. Mars is like our frustrated action, the moon is our longing, and they're all sitting there together, and they are focused there on the house of the individual. There is this mix of like self mentality and group mentality. How yourself can you be in a group? Can you truly be yourself in a group? But actually, can you even see yourself clearly without the context of a group? In the past, we lived in tribes, we lived in groups, and we were together. You see this when like Bruce Parry or somebody goes and there's these like small groups of people who are still living in an authentic indigenous way without phones or electricity or internet, and when he would ask them, well, what makes you happy? What do you think that the meaning of life is, essentially, they would say being together. Our joy is being together, and we just can't imagine what it would be like if we weren't. We're with our ancestors, we're with our nature, but at the end of the day, we're together. That is our truth, that is our joy. And it feels as though that these days, loneliness is the new normal, and loneliness is like a true pandemic. Suicide rates are at an all-time high, and it's almost like we've been taken out of context. We've been taken out of group context, and we've been put into this highly individualized context where it's very hard to cope. It's very hard to be very successful as an individual, you know, and we over-identify. We all have these profiles. We all have these many different profiles and morning routines and things we do, and what's your job and how are you and what's your style and what's your this, and it's impossible. It is impossible to cope long term. And I think this is what we are being shown, is this stellium in Aries, this wounded stellium in Aries is showing us the fragments in our collective, the fragments in our society. And the moon passing through that, I think, will really emphasize that on Thursday and over the course of this weekend, about just some awareness of the wounding and the softness which is around. So as always, what I really recommend you to do is to look at where Aries falls in your chart. And because there's so much kind of old, slow-moving, quite unearthing, painful planets and points in Aries at the moment, looking at where Aries falls in your chart will show you where you are called to bring some personal change, and then at some point where you can share it. So which house is ruled by Aries is where you will be slightly more called, especially if you have planets there. I would pay particular attention to what is going on in there. Okay, my lovelies. Well, I hope you have a fantastic full moon. It's on Thursday evening, and yeah, see ya.